All right. Hi, everybody. So, welcome. We're so excited to have you join us. I'm going to pin my screen here. So, my name is Brittany. I work as the program coordinator for River Raisin Institute. So, I'm going to mute everybody because I want to make sure that you can hear me. So, I'll unmute people as questions come up. So, for River Raisin Institute, most of you may not have heard of it too much beforehand. It often is confused with the River Raisin Watershed Council. So River Raisin Institute was actually created by the IHM Sisters. That's where our office is. But we do a variety of programs. These type included is the Wildlife Series. It's part of our environmental education programs. We have sustainability awareness programs as well as ecological stewardship. So we do invasive species removals. We do all kinds of different programs throughout the year, all free. So if you come to them, they're always free. But we're excited to have you join us. So I'm actually going to switch over to the main presenter for our event today. That is Sue Bixler, and I'll let her introduce herself. You gotta unmute you. There you
There
go,
we go.
Sue.
Yeah, Sue Bixler, and I have the privilege of working at Ohio State University's Stone Laboratory. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Stone Laboratory, we are a small 6.5 acre island adjacent to Put-in Bay, right across the water in the bay near Perry's Victory Monument. And we have a variety of reasons that we're there. We're educational. We do a lot of research. And we are very vested in the Lake Erie environment. One of the things that we do focus on are our snake population. The woman that I work for and that Spencer knows very well is the Island Snake Lady. And she has been featured, I actually grabbed it here in a Dirty Jobs episode with Mike Rowe to kind of share the plight of what our Lake Erie water snake was dealing with. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But part of my job is education and research. And since we're in the condition that we're in right now, where we don't have an opportunity to get out and get into the schools and the conferences and share, I'm thankful for this opportunity with River Raisin Institute, which I've worked with before as a teacher in Monroe County in Michigan, to be able to share a little bit with you about snakes that we find in Michigan and Ohio. One of the first things I want to do is share a video that we have made that's Dr. Stanford and myself out on Gibraltar Island, which is our island, that's the official name for our island. And it actually shows us catching the snakes. Now, the Lake Erie water snake is federally threatened, state endangered. It was delisted in August of 2011, meaning that it was removed from the list due to population numbers being back more adequately where we wanted them to be, 23rd species ever delisted. And it's a success story. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But what we want you to see is actually how we catch these snakes to do the research to determine whether or not we can delist them. The snake is non-venomous. It lives basically on land, but goes into the water to get its food. It likes to eat fish, and we'll talk a little bit more about what it likes to eat. Even though they're not venomous, they are a biter. They're a little bit aggressive. And so this is a snake that when you reach for it, it's not very happy. They get about 3 foot long. I don't mind getting bit. It's the foul odor, the musk that they get on you when they are trying to attempt not to have you pick them up. So we'll kind of share with you a little bit here in this quick video that we're going to show at the beginning on how we actually get these snakes to be able to do the research that we do. So Brittany, when you're ready to show that, we'll let it go. We'll play it. I think, Brittany, we may have to unmute that.
Yeah, I can't hear the video. Brittany, is your screen unmuted?
So I texted her to tell her it's more just music that goes along with this, but this basically is just showing you the intensity of how these guys actually, these snakes actually do not like to be picked up. So we filmed this one day on Gibraltar. So the black mats are there. They're all over. We have them on Kelly's, North Bass, South Bass, all over the Lake Erie Islands. And they are there to attract the snakes. The snakes like the heat. They'll go underneath it. So Kristen knows that when she wants to gather a large amount of snakes in a short period of time, we just pull the mat back and they're under there in great numbers. And if you notice, and if you've ever seen the Dirty Jobs episode, it's called Snake Researcher. If you ever want to actually look at it, Kristen will pick up 5, 6, 8 of these snakes at one time. And she's getting bit. We put them in our pillowcases, our high-tech research bags that we use. And then we take them back and we process them. Now, when we process them, it's getting the information that we need, and then we release them in the same spot that we find them. So if we find them on Kelly's, we find them on Put-in-Bay, if we find them on Gibraltar Island, they're re-released exactly where we find them. The next one, I have a little snake named Jib. I named him after Gibraltar Island. He is a Lake Erie water snake, and I took him back over to the lab a couple weeks ago, and I said to Kristen, hey, let's make a video showing how we actually process the snake. So we're going to have Brittany, and this one we need to have the sound turned on, Brittany. It's actually going to show us, you guys, the process that we do to actually record the data and get what we need for the snake research. So the next video actually is Kristen talking to you, taking my little jib and showing you what we do in order to get the information we need.
All right, yeah, and I'll do a quick check after I start the video. Everyone just give me a thumbs up if you hear it. If you don't, let me know either via comment or whatever, but I will ensure that you can hear this upcoming video. So And share screen.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kristen Stanford, and I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator for Stone Laboratory. And today we have little Jib here, who is a Lake Erie water snake, and he is going to be the newest addition to our captive colony of animals that we use for teaching here at Stone Lab. And so we've had
Sue, you can hear it? Okay.
Jib, we've kind of been working with him a little bit to make sure that he's going to be a good fit. And so today we're going to take his first measurements for introduction into the colony, and we're going to give him a special tag that will uniquely identify him. Basically, you know, just gives him a number. Okay, so Jib here, first thing we do, we're going to look at him. He is a banded Lake Erie water snake, so we describe our snakes as either being banded, like this little guy here, Jib, or unbanded, which means that they would have no pattern on them whatsoever, or an intermediate, which basically means that they have some coloration on their back and maybe some on their sides, but that it doesn't quite meet, it doesn't quite touch. And so if you can see there, his bands are quite large, and in some cases they make a complete half circle around his back. In other cases, there's the blotching, the dorsal blotching and the lateral blotching, but those both touch. And so that is what we would consider a classically banded animal. And so I keep calling him he, but how do I know that it is a male? Well, if I look at his tail structure, right here, this is called the snake's cloaca or vent. And in a male snake, as the body tapers, sometimes you can actually see it, and with him you can a little bit. It pinches in just a little bit right at that cloaca, continues to run parallel before it starts to continually taper down. Some individuals, it's not quite as obvious, and so the other way that I can test to see if I'm right, so I'm saying that he's a male before I'm going to do this next technique, is I'm going to use a probe. It's a blunt probe. It's just a little piece of metal that I'm going to try to insert down into the base of the tail. If it is a male snake, that probe should go down to right about here. And if it was a female snake, it would not go anywhere. I would try to push it in gently, but it would not go anywhere. So we're going to test to see whether I'm right if Jib is a male or not. Okay, oops. Actually have to get in there. Sorry, buddy. Stop wiggling.
Getting a little bit of an odor.
Yes.
He's not a happy
I
camper.
know, he keeps moving. Stop swirling.
And so to clarify for everyone watching, this is not harming the snake. He is not being injured in any way. It's just uncomfortable, but he is not being harmed.
Okay, there we go. All right. Now, I don't know if you can see that here, but I'm going to go ahead and grab right there, and you're going to see how much I'm going to be able to pull out. Did you see that? So that meant that that probe was able to be inserted, and so that shows that I was correct, and it is a male. Okay. So now, we know he's a male, we know he's a banded male, and now we're going to take his snout to vent length. That's the measure from the tip of the snout to the vent or cloaca. He is 420 millimeters or 42 centimeters. In our study, we measure in millimeters, so we're going to call him 420. And then we're going to take his mass. It's 34 grams. To insert I'm going to show you what it looks like since it's already, I have it preloaded into a sterilized needle here already. We're going to insert a microchip, which we often call a pit tag, underneath his skin. And that little tag, each of these little tags has its own unique number and letter code. So that's what the tag is, oops, that's what the tag looks like. It's already in there. And we use that in our research, but then also within the colony. It basically gives them a unique code that if for whatever reason somebody wanted to if I had multiple water snakes and I couldn't tell them apart, I could scan each water snake and I would know which one was which based on the tag. Like let's say I had several little jibs here and they all kind of looked alike and it was difficult to tell them apart. We don't necessarily have that in our case, but we're still going to give them a tag. And that's because it is actually the proper thing to do when you have captive animals, wild animals, with your Division of Wildlife or your Department of Natural Resources. So, okay, here's our tag. Go just under the skin. Plunger, you can actually see that tag go in. Pull it out. See, there's barely any mark at all. The tag is right under there. And so now, just to show you, we're going to turn this on. And so there is little Jib's new number. Aww. And that's it. Welcome to the family, Jib. We're glad to have you.
All right. So
I cut Kristen off basically before she said she was making a point about how we're happy to have you, and then how he was going to educate lots of people. So basically, here's Jib. I'd like to introduce you to him. He's here today to see you. As Brittany said, he just snapped his little mouth at the screen. As Brittany said, it does not hurt him. He was just squirming, and then they let off the musk odor. This was the first time that we had ever actually sexed him. We just assumed he was a male. He's about 2 years old. Now, the interesting thing about the Lake Erie water snake, let's talk a little bit. They're related to the common or northern water snake. So when you are walking along Lake Erie and you are in Toledo or Sandusky or an area like that, even in Michigan, when you're walking along any body of water there, you're going to see the common or northern water snake. It is a relative of these guys. They are Neurodeoscypodon cypodon. That is the genus species name. Our little guys are very unique. They're found only around the Lake Erie Islands, and so they were given the name Lake Erie water snakes. They're indigenous only to Kelly's, North Bass, South Bass, Gibraltar, any of the Lake Erie Islands, including Pelee in Canada. And so they're a subspecies. They are called they're a Neurodeoscypodon insularium. And so that's their genus species name. What makes these guys different is they're passing on a genetic characteristic to lose the banding pattern. Now, Jib is very banded. A lot of the Lake Erie water snakes that you will see when you're out people think they're water moccasins. They are a dark or slate gray without any banding. They're all Lake Erie water snakes, and as Kristen said, they can be banded, intermediately banded, or have no bands at all. What makes them unique is, and this is why they were made a subspecies, is they're not swimming to the mainland to mate. They're mating only among the other water snakes in the Lake Erie Islands. And so for that reason, that genetic characteristic of no bands is being passed. We're a granite or limestone bottom, more so limestone or dolomite. And so it's a more efficient technique for these guys to blend in. Now, people say, and this is the interesting part of this, people say, well, it's a snake, we don't care. The numbers had dropped greatly in the right about 1990, late 1980s. We were noticing that the population of this particular Lake Erie water snake, we weren't seeing the numbers. And so the quest to begin to save them began, and people say, well, they're not cute. And it's very difficult to try to save something like this that a lot of people find repulsive. And you can see how they bite and they musk, and they'd be on people's docks and in their yards, and people assumed they were venomous. And so a lot of misinformation out there. A lot of these snakes were killed. Nobody thought twice about beheading them or taking them and just, throwing them into fires and burning them. The Lake Erie Islands used to be called the Isles of Snakes because there were so many of them. They called them wreaths of snakes, and they looked like big wreaths, which were mating balls basically, but they were known for the number of snakes there. So nobody thought too much about taking them and getting rid of them. So we started a process where through education and research, we were able to reestablish this population. And in August of 2011, this was the 23rd species ever to be delisted. So we call it a success story. They are still considered threatened. So if someone harms one or does something to cause it to, he doesn't necessarily like to be touched around his face, somebody sees somebody, they can report it, and there is a fine still associated with harming this snake. So they're still considered threatened. We still watch the population. Jib has been, and you saw Kristen go through the process, is now part of our captive colony. So what is the captive colony? Well, Stone Laboratory is a teaching facility, and we have college students, conference groups, and one of the big things we do is field trips for students. Now, of course, it didn't happen this year. The captive colony is in, and you heard the noise, it's in something called a Darwin chamber, which is heat, pressure, light sensitive, gives the snake everything it needs. We have turtles, salamanders in there, a lot of different animals that we use to teach. And so while it's illegal to keep a captive wild-caught snake, you heard Kristen talk about, we work with the DNR, and we are given a permit that allows us to keep a certain number for education purposes. So the snakes that we catch, and you saw Kristen actually catching a vast amount of those were research-based. We use that to do the count, to keep up with the numbers of the snake. And you can do that by using mathematical equations to figure out actually what your snake count is on the islands. These little guys, and you heard Kristen say on the video, not all of them are capable of being used for outreach. When you put a snake in a child's hands, you want to make sure that you're not saying to them, hey, this is an animal that you need to be afraid of. We want them to respect them and understand and be able to interact with them, which Spencer's done a lot of times. Spencer's learned how we use them and how we interact with them. When Kristen said we want to see if Jib's a good animal to be using for our education or our captive colony, sometimes you get them that you just cannot, in handling them, ever use them because they're biters. Occasionally they'll surprise you. I know Spencer, my buddy here, that's in here listening today, one of our Eastern milk snakes did catch him by surprise at one of my outreach events. And so we tell Spencer now he's a member of our club. He's been bitten, I've been bitten, Kristen's been bitten, and Spencer's been bitten. So he's now a special member of our club that actually has been bitten by the snake. We don't want that to happen, but occasionally it does. And so when the kids handle them, they know that there's always that risk. But for the most part, our animals are really docile, and we teach people respect them, understand what they're about, and then just, if you find one in the wild, step back, look at it, admire it, and let it go and do its own thing. So we try to spread the outreach, the love of the animal, like I said, Oftentimes an animal like this that's not cute and cuddly like a panda bear, sometimes it's hard to say, hey, this is also an animal that needs to be respected and needs to be preserved. So Lake Erie water snake is truly unique. It's one that we spend a lot of time working with. There is a disease out there now called the snake fungal disease, which we're a little bit concerned about. It's very similar to that bat's white nose syndrome. And when you see a snake that has the snake fungal disease, they almost look like they have leprosy. It's very sad, big open sores and blisters. And so that's one of the new diseases that we're looking at and trying to study. They're also taking swabs of these animals when they catch them and sending them in to see what percentage is coming back with that particular disease. So that's something that we're looking at as well. So this is the story of the Lake Erie water snake. Real quick, one thing I want to interject, there is an invasive species called a round goby. It's a fish, and we estimate there's about 10 billion of them in the western basin of Lake Erie alone. I'm sure if you fish, you've come across a goby. They were let loose by mistake. We used to have freighters that would take ballast water in whatever body of water they were sitting in. So these actually came from the Caspian Sea. So unfortunately, some freighter came in with ballast water from the Caspian Sea, and let's say they came into the Port of Toledo to unload their load. They unload the load, and then to balance or counterbalance the boat back out, they would let their ballast water back out. And guess what? In that ballast water were the gobies, and the gobies swam back out. Now, why don't we like gobies? Because they reproduce very quickly, and they eat perch and smallmouth bass eggs. And those of you that are familiar with Lake Erie fishing, perch and smallmouth bass are two fish that we really like. And the goby is just ravenous. It just gobbles up those eggs. And so if you ever catch a goby, you don't ever want to throw it back in. Now, why am I bringing a goby up? Because a goby is part of what helped the Lake Erie water snake repopulate itself. Now, what do I mean by that? The major food source for the Lake Erie water snake was something called a mud puppy, which was a small aquatic fish or salamander type animal. And they're disappearing. We're not seeing them. And I don't want to get into too much specifics here, but the zebra mussel has clarified the water. And the mud puppy likes more of a muddy kind of shallow bottom that's darker. And with that water clarity, we're not seeing the mud puppies. So the food source for the Lake Erie water snake is disappearing. We didn't see it. Goby moves in. Goby is very similar in build to a mud puppy. It doesn't have a spiny dorsal fin. It's short, kind of thick bodied, and it hangs on the bottom. It doesn't have a swim bladder. So guess what? Guess what? And Kristen didn't show it, but one other thing that we do when we catch a Lake Erie water snake with a food source in its belly is we make it throw up. Now, how do you puke a snake? You actually take your hand, you feel where the food item is in its belly, and you just gently force your hand forward, and will cause that, and if you watch the Dirty Jobs video, it'll cause that snake to regurgitate up what it ate. Now, if it's too digested, we can't do that, but if we can feel the food source in their belly, we know we can still look at that. And so when Kristen and the crew that go out and do the research actually make the snake puke, and we put them in little plastic bags and take a look at the numbers, about 90% of their diet now is that round goby. Now, what's interesting about that is majority of the time, an invasive animal competes. It's not good. We don't like the goby. If you catch one, don't throw it back in. But in this case, it was one time when an invasive species actually benefited a native animal. And so it's kind of a cool success story. I go into a lot of schools and I take the goby and I take the water snake, and we talk about that interaction, how that is such a unique and rare time or instance where we actually find an animal benefiting. Usually they compete. So kind of a fun story, and it did help reestablish us between the education standpoint, telling our homeowners they're not venomous, telling our boat owners how to get them out of their boats safely. People understand they're not a hazard. They understand just walk away from them, let them do their thing. They're not going to bite you unless you actually reach for them. which Micro learned. And so the interaction here between human population and the water snake at Put-in-Bay is much better, at Kelly's is better, at North Bass is better. People are understanding, plus I said the introduction of the goby. So it's kind of a cool story. We like to share it. We thought we would kind of show you the processing and how you actually sex the snake. I don't know, Brittany, on time, I'm looking at the time, it's 1:34. Would you like me to talk a little bit about the fox snake? This is a snake that actually, the Lake Erie water snakes actually found a way to make a comeback, and now we're worried about a little snake called the eastern fox snake, which we do find around the islands, but we also find in the Monroe, Michigan area. And so because River Raisin is located in the Monroe, Michigan area, we like to talk a lot about the eastern fox snake. So would you like me to grab little Leonard for a minute, Brittany? Thumbs up. Okay, give me 2 seconds. Leonard is right here.
So, does anyone here have any pet snakes of their own or know of people that do? Yeah. All right, 2 of our people have snakes. That's really cool. We'll have a video later. It'll teach you, if you know someone that wants to adopt one or already owns one, it'll teach them what you need to know to own a snake. So go ahead, Sue.
All right, we'll just talk about the eastern fox snake. So guys, this is an eastern fox snake. Leonard is young yet. These snakes get 5 to 6 feet. Very prevalent around Lucas, Ottawa, Erie, Sandusky, and Huron counties in Ohio, and Monroe County in Michigan. Now, they're a riparian snake. If you're familiar with that word, riparian means they live on the water's edge. They're great swimmers. They're good climbers. They love to eat mice and birds' eggs and baby birds. Nova, excuse me. We don't want to have Nova feel threatened. The problem that we're having with this snake right now is, and if you listened, I said only 5 to 6 counties in Ohio and very little in Michigan, being a riparian snake. How many of you have been to the to Sterling State Park? If you drive into Sterling State Park in Monroe, you'll see a sign with this particular snake's picture on it, and it says protected species. So what's happening is, guys, they're in 5 to 6 counties in Ohio, very few counties along the lake's edge in Monroe, and then we find them in Michigan, and then we occasionally find them in Ontario, Canada, and that is the limit of their range. So listen to this. In Ontario, they're endangered. In Michigan, they're protected, and in Ohio, they're a species of concern. So this is a snake that we're concerned about. Whereas my Lake Erie water snake has made a resurgence and has been delisted, this is the next little guy that we're worried about. And when I say little, they get really big. They can get 5 to 6 feet long. Now, why are they in trouble? Several reasons. If you can see, and I'm not sure what you see, I just see myself in a little box here. They have a coppery colored head, and they have markings that are similar to, and I know a lot of you are not familiar with a copperhead rattlesnake, but they're very similar in their marking, and that copper colored head does not help them. Okay, and I'm not sure if you can see how it is a very copper color. One of our favorite outreach snakes that lived for about 17 to 18 years, her name was Penny, and she was named Penny because she had that copper colored head. And then when we found the little boy, we named him Sheldon. It just seemed to go hand in hand. So we had Penny and Sheldon. What the biggest issue with these guys is the copper colored head, and then they're big at mimicry. Now, if you know the meaning of the word mimicry, it means that an animal pretends it's something it's not. And if you look at his tail, this is little Leonard, and you can pick up, we named him Leonard because we just kind of kept up with our scenario of Penny and Sheldon. He has you see no rattles on that tail, okay? And basically though, what he does is he vibrates that tail. And when he vibrates it, it makes a sound like it does have a rattle. They have figured out how to rattle that in leaf litter to make it sound like it's got a rattle. So people immediately panic and assume that they have a venomous snake. And if you look at his head in no way, shape, or form is the shape of a venomous snake's head. It's more triangular, where this little guy is very, very oval shaped. His eyes are round. a venomous snake's eyes usually are cat-shaped in the United States. You know how a cat has the pupil that goes up and down. That's not true in any place else other than the United States. Just that's only a rule that we'll talk about here in the US. So if you're looking at a venomous snake, they have that cat's eye. They have a triangular shaped head, and then you don't want to get too close, but the rattle's then on the tail. But this little guy, misinformation, has gotten it in big trouble. The other thing is the pet trade. Now, I know that sounds silly, but this snake, and if I walked and picked up a 5-footer, and I would not hesitate at all. They don't, whereas you saw my water snake bite and nip, you can pick up, and I'm not suggesting that you pick up a large eastern fox snake. We tell you not to pick up a wild cut snake because you're not sure what it is. But if you pick up even a 5 to 6 footer, and this is the unfortunate part, they're very docile. They don't try to bite. And if they do bite, and occasionally they will, they'll open their mouth and try to, the teeth barely pierce your skin, okay? And so for the pet trade, because they're big and they're beautiful, for a while, people were picking this snake up, breeding it, and selling it to pet stores illegally, okay? It is illegal in the state of Michigan and Ohio to keep a wild-caught snake, okay? Again, I say we have them because we have permission. We have to fill out permits. We are audited. We get lab inspections on a regular basis. People come in. They go through what we're doing, how we did it. They check on the health of our animals. So we're monitored, and we have permission to do that. You, on the other hand, if you want a snake, there's a right way to do it. And it's not to go out in the wild and pick one up. Now, I told you they get 5 to 6 feet long. Why isn't Leonard 5 to 6 feet long? When Penny and Sheldon passed away and they had been with us for an extended period of time, they were large snakes. We don't think it's fair to go get a full-grown adult snake and put it in an aquarium, a snake that's lived for a long period of its life out in the wild. And so we take the younger snakes, work with them, get them acclimated, feed them, understand that they know that they have a place that they can go in. They all have little hibernaculum areas within their aquarium. They have the adequate water. They're fed on a regular basis. Their health is checked. We like to start our snakes smaller and then let them be used to, as they get older, an aquarium environment, because that's where they're going to be. And they're used to being held. There's correct ways to lift them out. We don't feed them in the same environment that they're going to be used for when they're being used for a child in an educational endeavor. So there's different things that you condition them for to get them ready. And so due to the pet trade, I said, which now is better, we're hoping, since rules and legislation has been put in place, it is illegal for breeders now to pick up the fox snake and sell them in a pet store. The big is the mimicry, the misunderstanding, the not knowing that people don't have a venomous snake. We had neighbors take a pool down in the spring. They no longer wanted it. It was an above ground pool. And when they pulled it back, because I live on the water's edge, lots of fox snakes, and people freaked. But they called me and they told me to come over. And when I walked in and I picked them up, they just looked at me. And I believe educated my whole neighborhood as to, hey guys, it's an eastern fox snake. If you have them in your yard, it's a good thing. They'll keep the rodent population down. They are not venomous. Please don't think you have a venomous snake. We have no venomous snakes here that we need to worry about. Matter of fact, guys, the chances of you in both Michigan and Ohio, except in certain pockets, the chances of you stumbling across one are very rare. There is Moss Sagwa population in some little pockets of Michigan and some in Ohio, but it's majority of snakes you run into are not going to be venomous. Now, that's not true necessarily in other parts of the United States, but in Michigan and Ohio, Monroe County, Lucas County, you're not going to see a lot of these or venomous snakes that you need to worry about. So this is Leonard, eastern fox snake. Whenever I take him into a classroom, I always try to get my kids on board to help spread the word to their parents and to other people if they're out in the woods, just to step back, take a look, appreciate, don't pick up, but spread the word. I know that's an eastern fox snake. He's just mimicking with his tail to make me feel like I should be afraid. but he's not venomous, but I'm not going to pick him up. Please don't hurt him. So I try to spread that word. So this is little Leonard. And hopefully someday, some of you guys that are on here will get an opportunity to take a field trip. Hopefully we get back to normal. You can come out to Stone Lab. You can share in the love of what we do with our snakes, with our birds, with all the other animals, our fish, our research that we do. We'd love to have you come out. So Brittany, maybe we should share the video now about the pet snake. People that would like to get a snake that's a pet, to understand the correct things that they need to understand and how to go about doing that.
Absolutely. Everyone give me a thumbs up in a second when I press play to make sure you can hear it.
All right, so this is our snake. She is actually a reticulated python. Her name is Khaleesi. Granted, everybody is going to have different opinions on the snakes that they're going to be researching. If you want a pet for your own, having pet snakes, I think, is personally awesome. They are the best. So when you're actually in the market for a pet snake, you want to make sure that you do your research. And I cannot stress that enough. Every snake is going to have different needs, and you really want to pay attention to the temperature and the humidity that snake requires. It's also very important that you do not go out and catch a snake from outside. It is, one, super illegal, and two, it is not in that snake's best interest to come from outside into captivity. That can be very stressful, and it is against the law. For most snakes, all of their requirements are going to be different because there's so many different species out there. So I don't want to exactly get into too much detail about that, just because of the fact of how many differences there is with them. There are a lot of snakes that are out there that are pretty good for beginner snakes, for people who's never really owned a snake before. So again, you do want to make sure you do your research, but some of those snakes you can look into are like corn snakes or ball pythons, little snakes like that, something that doesn't really get much bigger than 3 to 4 feet range. When you are looking for snakes, you want to make sure that you look up proper breeders, so someone that's licensed and knows what they're doing, or you can get them from a pet store. Just make sure that you go somewhere that you can trust and they're going to actually help you and lead you in the right direction rather than set you up for failure, because unfortunately there are people out there that will do that. All right, so I am actually going to demonstrate how to take a snake out of a cage. We use a snake hook. Generally what we use the snake hooks for is so that they can determine a difference between actual handling, between feeding response. So when we go in with the snake hook, I take this and I gently stroke the snake's head just to ensure not to spook them. And then we'll go ahead once they feel this. You can't really see her head here because she's hiding. But once she sees the hook, I can then go ahead and swing it under her body here and pull her out of the water. Now she's pretty big and she's holding on. She doesn't want to come out. But what that does is it helps show them that it's not time to eat. So we usually use tongs to feed them. Just because she is a bigger snake, this one's going to get about 20 feet. We just want to ensure, everybody stays safe when we're trying to get her out of the cage. Another thing that's also important when you're owning snakes is you have to take into consideration their full-grown size. So granted, yes, when you get them, they're going to be cute, small, tiny little baby. It's a lot easier to house that way. But you have to think about long-term with these guys, because a lot of these snakes do reach a good size going over about 4 feet, some even more so. So you really want to pay attention to the size that they become when they're a full-grown adult to really be sure you can accommodate this as a pet. When they're full grown, you want to make sure you've got the space in your household to have an enclosure, whether you build something yourself or you buy something that's already made, or an aquarium that can house them. So another thing that's important is having water in their cage. Not every snake is going to use it all the time, but it does help with their shed. And snakes generally shed their skin. That means that they're growing. So that's a good thing. You want them to shed their skin. And a lot of the times when they soak in their water, it helps loosen their skin up and it makes it easier for them. So this is my daughter. She's 7, and this is actually her pet snake. This is Simba. And ever since she's really been a baby, honestly, she's been raised around exotic animals her whole life. So we wanted to make sure that from the very beginning, she was familiar with how to handle these kinds of animals. So do you want to take a second and tell everybody that, how you pick up your snake?
You want to make sure you are not going straight toward their face. You pick them up from their middle. Don't let their tail hang. You want to make sure they're supported, and you also don't want to just touch their face if they do not like it.
They'll jerk back, huh?
Yeah, and they do not they don't like their tail hanging.
And one thing is really important. So even though she's been raised around snakes her whole life, we still always have supervision. I don't ever really let her take the snake out and handle by herself, only because I want to ensure that nobody, the snake or herself included, get injured or hurt, whether it be the snake getting scared and biting her or her moving too fastly and potentially injuring the snake. So it's always important, regardless of the age of your children, that you do supervise. And we also can't stress enough that you don't go outside and catch snakes, right?
Yes, no, you do not catch your own snake.
No, you got to go to a pet store, right?
Yes, or either I got my snake by actually reptile show.
From a breeder.
Yes. And that is also a good place to get a snake.
Yeah.
So that was a great way to end this. It kind of, I appreciated it that Brittany shared that, and that the family that was able to share the fact that, yeah, the wild caught snakes are cool, but we don't want anybody to go out and catch one. We want you to understand that you just respect them, you step back, you let them do their thing. They have a place in the ecosystem. And if you love them, and I know there's 2 people on this video that are young that really love them, and they both got their snakes the correct way. And I appreciate that. And we're happy to hear that there are kids out there that want to follow the rules, that they want to do it correctly. They love the snakes, they love to interact with them, but they went about it and they did it the right way. So Brittany, do we want to open it up for some questions, or what do we want to do? We're at 1:52, so.
Yeah, we can. We actually have a question right now by Karen. She wants some clarification. She asks, are there any venomous snakes in Michigan? So
Yes, there are. There's actually 3 venomous snakes in Michigan, but in this pocket, and are you a Monroe County, is she a Monroe County resident?
I'll answer that as soon as she
Okay.
responds.
Yeah, the one that we most often have to look for around this area and Ohio too is the Massasauga. Now, Massasauga is a small, short-bodied snake. They're actually endangered. They are venomous. If you got bit by one, you're going to have to go to the hospital, but it's not like getting bit by a rattlesnake that you would encounter in Arizona, some of the very, very venomous ones there. No, you don't want to get bit. Yes, you'll end up going to the hospital. Yes, they'll have to work with you a bit, but the chances of a healthy adult or even a child making it through that bite are probably pretty good. They're a very secretive snake, and they also are on the endangered list right now. So we're really not seeing them. There is a large pocket of them in Hillsdale County. I know when they're looking for them to do the research, that's where they go to look. So there's signage up in Sterling about them as well.
So to answer your question, we'll say Monroe and Wayne County is honestly where most of the people watching this are going to be living. So
I'd say Wayne County as well. I know there was a little girl, and again, I get my designating the lines in Michigan. I know there was a little girl up near Detroit that was gardening one day that got bit by a juvenile, and they brought that out in the news. This was a few years ago, and she was fine, but they were cautioning, hey, this is snake season. They are out. There is one venomous in that area. So yes, but the majority of snakes that you're going to run into are not going to be venomous, but that's why we tell you don't pick them up. And there's those, I mean, it's just not a good sound practice ever. Most snakes do not want to be picked up. And again, what you're looking for is the head shape. And you notice here again, Leonard, he's got a oval shaped head. It's very distinct on a venomous snake, very triangular. Again, if you're close enough to look at the eyes, that may be too close. You can see his little eyes are very round. So that's one of the features that we talk about here in the United States. Like I said, don't hold that as a truth outside of the United States. But that's usually a good indication it's not venomous. And then again, you always look for the rattle on the tails. But in the case of Leonard, he's very good at mimicry. So he makes it sound like he's got rattles when he really doesn't.
So something that I think some people might want to know is, so where are common places that you can expect to see wild snakes? So you had some mats, but where are some places that people can expect to either avoid if they're worried about finding a snake in the wild, or just to be cautious of?
If you're hiking along a path, especially in a metro park or somewhere like Sterling, you'll encounter them. They'll be I've seen them several times just hiking there, but they're usually just crossing the road or basking on the pavement because it's warmer. Snakes are basically, there's a big high class word for it, but basically cold-blooded. They need to warm their body up, but they also, if it gets too hot, they got to go somewhere to hide to bring body temperature down. So when you're walking in a park, you might see them just basking. I know at Put-in-Bay, just on a regular commute from the ferry to the Stone Lab offices on South Bass, they'll be out in the road, and I don't know how many times I've stopped and picked them up and moved them off to the side of the road because they have a tendency to get hit by the golf carts, which is kind of sad. In the case of a milk snakes are very prevalent all over Michigan and Ohio, and they're very secretive. They're a nocturnal snake, and they like to hide. They're in barns and under wood piles. So depending on the species of the snake, garter snakes are probably what you'll see the most, and they eat insects. So you're going to see them in an area where there's a high insect population. Milk snakes eat mice, so they're going to be in barns in an area where it's more conducive for them to catch mice. Water snakes want fish, so the area you're going to find them is along the water's edge. These guys eat eggs. So you're going to find them in trees, but they're also a riparian snake. They like the water. They have to be near the water. So you're going to see them. I see them quite often just hanging on the water's edge, looking for like seagull eggs, because gulls oftentimes lay their eggs just around on the ground. But they're good climbers. They'll go up. I did an outreach event with one of our big snakes. I think it was Sheldon. And I took him to an area that is located here right near Toledo, so right on the lake. And I talked all about Sheldon and the fact that he was non-venomous and gave the features. And the next day I got a photo from a lady who had walked in one of the metro parks, and there was a bird box, like a box that you would put up to have babies be born in. And sticking his head out of that box was a great big eastern fox snake. And she sent me a note and said, "Thank you, Sheldon, for letting me know that it was a non-venomous snake and what I was witnessing." And he was probably in there having lunch. So short of this person freaking out and thinking it had a venomous snake because she said it was vibrating its tail, Sheldon helped educate. So if you know that, if you know what you're looking for, and you understand that you're going to see the snake in the area where their food source is at, under logs, near the water's edge, up in trees, it's not uncommon to see a snake hanging from a tree, and that oftentimes will alarm somebody, but they're up there for a reason.
Any other questions? You can feel free to unmute yourself if you would like to ask any questions personally.
One thing I think that we need to point out, and maybe my friend here on the video that has the pet snakes at home will, and my other little buddy here, they know, it's oftentimes these snakes eat mice, and it's not always the most fun type of environment if you're a little bit queasy. I know, and I can't speak to Lauren, but we do the frozen mice. We don't like the mice to fight back. If you put a live mouse in, oftentimes with an animal, it will fight back, and it's in an enclosed area. So we thaw our mice out and then put them on the tongs and hand it to the snake and give them an opportunity to take it. But if you're not into that kind of thing, sometimes, you know, think twice about getting a snake if you're not real comfortable with the feeding regimen, because it's a process. It takes work. My garter snakes, we give earthworms at the colony. We have to go and get the gobies in the summer on our trawls, or get the minnows for the water snakes to feed them. We do get our mice from research labs at OSU. We're able to get our mice that way, but feeding is a process. It's not easy. And so before you go out and get a snake, consider the fact that it's not like putting birdseed down. There's some work involved with it.
So what's the average lifespan of a pet snake? Obviously that'll be different per breed, but
right. I can't talk about a pet snake. I know for our eastern fox snakes, we say it was anywhere from, Kristen would say 17 to 20 years, and we estimate we had probably Penny and Sheldon that long or close to it. And then for the water snakes, they're a little less. Now this is in captivity, guys. A snake has a lot of things going on out in the wild between people and predators. Like, it's not uncommon at Put-in-Bay to see a Lake Erie water snake being carried by a bird of prey. That's one of their favorite foods. And so in captivity, we say for a water snake about 15 years. And we had Ethel. Ethel was just the coolest snake ever. And she did a lot of the outreach. She was a great ambassador for us. And she lived about 15 to 16 years. So in captivity, they have a little bit better shot. Out in the wild, a lot of predators, a lot of people. It's kind of unfortunate. Lake Erie water snakes are live bearers. They have their babies alive. Each one's in its own little placenta. And when mom has those babies, they're on their own. So it's not uncommon to see baby water snakes in the month of September. August, September is when they're born. And they follow a pheromone scent to a hiberniculum, and they spend the winter. Nature has made it so that they're able to sustain themselves through the winter, and then they eat when they come out that next spring. But it's really sad because at Put-in-Bay, mom has the babies across the road, and then they head to the hiberniculums, which are closer to the water's edge oftentimes. And you don't see the babies. So there's a high percentage of deaths of those baby water snakes that have been hit by cars, and I guess at Put-in-Bay more like golf carts. And I even see them out here, the common water snake. I live in an area here right along the water's edge, and it's not uncommon for me to walk in August and September and see a high amount of deaths of babies, infants that didn't make it across the road, or were out basking and, trying to get their energy level up and then didn't make it. So I'm not sure, maybe, Lauren could speak to how long her captive snakes are. I'm not as familiar with the tropical snakes.
Yeah. Honestly, just from pure experience and research in itself, it's honestly around the same time frame, about 15, 20-ish years. But again, it does depend on the snake. I know, like I personally, I've got a reticulated python and a red-tailed boa, both of which have known to live a little bit around 20, a little bit older, 20 years.
So, I mean, a snake's probably basically a snake, and maybe that's not the right thing to say, but you know, captive snakes, well taken care of, that the longevity can be, you know, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And that's something people also have to consider when you have a snake that you're keeping, that you need
Oh,
to be
yeah.
into it, you know, in it for the long haul.
That's one of the main things I told my daughter too. She's the 7-year-old that was in the video, that this is something that she's going to have, and she's an adult, and she got actually more excited than I was expecting for her. She's like, I'm going to have this when I'm older. I'm like, yeah, you are. So, okay.
That's kind of a cool thing. That is.
It is, yeah.
Any other questions?
Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
I would like to ask a question to Spencer. Are you unmuted, Spencer?
Yeah.
I'd like to know how Claire is. Tell me what kind of snake Claire is. Let everybody know what kind of snake you got for a pet.
A corn snake.
Right. And how's Claire doing?
Good.
And tell everybody what you have to feed Claire.
Frozen pinky mice.
And what's a pinky mouse?
A baby mouse.
Very good. And so Spencer's one of our favorite little guys that we have come visit us at Stone Lab. He has a real love of snakes, and he helps us, and he comes to outreach events and helps me share the message. And because of his love of snakes, he was able to earn the responsibility and the right to get a pet snake of his own. And so we're very proud of him. He does a great job.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So I'll open it up. I'll give you another 10 seconds. If anyone else wants to ask a question, feel free. If not, we'll probably thank Sue Bixler here. So any other final questions?
I'd just like to encourage everybody, once the pandemic gets itself under control and Stone Lab opens back up, come on out, visit us. We have open houses, we give tours, educational field trips for kids grades 5 through 12. If you have an accelerated junior or senior who's interested in an environmental college class for credit, send them out. And then we have the whole realm of OSU college classes that we offer throughout the summer for credit if you are an OSU student while you are there, but the credits transfer to any university that you are going to. So if you need more information, I think Brittany was going to post email addresses so that you can get a hold of us. Maybe you can put those on the website, Brittany, or is there a better way to do that?
So for my email, it was listed on our Facebook event page.
Okay.
I just posted in the chat. So if you have any questions or if you want to start attending more of our events, so for instance, the wildlife series is on a different animal or species every other month, usually. We offer about 6 a year. So obviously this year we weren't able to offer as many, but we typically offer them roughly every other month. We have one either January or February. We're looking to have it on waterfowl and waterfowl ID, so that'll be fun. We could do frogs and toads this year. We might do one on mute swans. It's honestly, the sky's the limit. We'll have a ton of different options, and it's regular. So if you join our mailing list, we can always tell you about upcoming events, or just follow us on our Facebook event page. I update it regularly. But if you have any questions and you want to email me directly, my email's in the chat, but it's BLEICK@rriearth.org. So, and then Sue, if anyone has any questions, feel free to contact Sue as well. So
I can give you their Stone Labs email address. I don't know, is it backwards, Brittany?
stonelab.osu.edu.
.edu. Then I'm real easy. I'm Bixler, BIXLER lab.42@osu.edu. So feel free to get a hold of me, or if you want more information on what we're doing at the lab or the research that we're involved in. We're big on the water quality, the algal blooms also in Lake Erie. So we have a lot going on in research in a variety of ways.
Yeah,
So
maybe we'll do
anything-
one on sea lamprey.
Oh, I can help you with that too. We usually have tanks of sea lamprey. We run the Aquatic Visitors Center, and I work with the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, and we bring sea lamprey in that have reached the point in their life that they're no longer eating or breeding or feeding, and we bring them in for the last couple months of their life cycle so people can actually see the invasive sea lamprey.
Yeah. So Karen says this was really wonderful, very informative, great videos. Thanks so much. So
Well, thanks everybody. We really appreciate your time and effort, and for coming and joining us, and it's been fun.
yeah, thanks everybody. We're glad you could join us, and we hope to see you at future events.
See ya.
Bye.